Three men stand in a burning town square. As a crowd closes in, Blake's hand moves toward his gun. The Thorne brothers step forward, shielding Marcus between them. One wrong move and blood will spill. But what brought a lonely drifter to this moment, willing to die for love? Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The dust settled slow across the valley as Marcus Webb pulled back on the reins, his silver-gray eyes narrowing at the sight before him. Two figures stood at the gate of the Double T Ranch, identical in their towering frames, broad shoulders blocking out the late afternoon sun like twin monuments carved from the same unforgiving stone. The Thorne brothers. Even from a distance, Marcus could feel the weight of their presence, the way they commanded the space around them with nothing more than stillness and certainty. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry, despite the canteen at his hip. This was supposed to be simple, a job. 3 months of ranch work to earn enough coin to buy his own land, to finally stop drifting from place to place like tumbleweeds with no roots. But the moment Caleb Thorne stepped forward, his dark eyes locking onto Marcus with an intensity that made the air feel thick, Marcus knew nothing about this arrangement would be simple. "Welcome to the Double T," Caleb said, his voice deep and rough like gravel grinding under boot heels. His twin brother Nathaniel moved beside him, a mirror image save for the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a sharper, more dangerous edge. "We have been waiting for you." Marcus dismounted, his legs unsteady though he blamed it on the long ride. He was not a small man himself, had always been lean and wiry with the kind of strength that came from years of hard labor. But standing before the Thorne brothers, he felt the difference between being strong and being powerful. They did not just occupy space, they owned it. "I appreciate the work," Marcus managed, his voice steadier than he felt. "I will earn my keep." Nathaniel's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "We will make sure of that." The way he said it sent a strange electricity down Marcus's spine, something that settled low in his chest and refused to leave. He told himself it was nerves, the natural wariness of working for men whose reputation preceded them like thunder before a storm. The Thorne brothers were known across 3 territories, hard workers, harder men, and utterly uncompromising in everything they did. They had built the Double T from nothing, carved it out of wilderness and stubbornness, and anyone who worked their land learned quickly that the brothers demanded absolute dedication. Marcus followed them through the gate, acutely aware of how they flanked him, one on each side, their strides long and measured. The ranch stretched before them, well-maintained fences, sturdy barns, horses that gleamed with health in their paddocks. Everything spoke of control, of hands that knew exactly what they wanted and how to get it. "Your quarters are in the bunkhouse," Caleb said, gesturing toward a low building near the main barn. "But you will take your meals with us in the main house. We prefer to know the men working our land." Marcus nodded, feeling the heat of Nathaniel's gaze on the side of his face. The twin had not stopped watching him since he arrived, studying him like a puzzle that needed solving. It made Marcus hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. That night, Marcus sat at the long wooden table in the Thorne brothers' house, a plate of stew before him that he could barely taste. The twins sat across from him, their presence filling the room despite the space between them. Candlelight flickered across Caleb's strong features, caught in the dark scruff along his jaw, while Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, with an ease that somehow made him more intimidating, not less. "So," Caleb began, breaking a piece of bread with hands that were scarred and calloused from years of work, "what brings a man to our door looking for ranch work?" Marcus met his eyes, refusing to look away even though something in that gaze made his pulse quicken. "Saving up, planning to buy land of my own." Nathaniel made a low sound, almost approving. "A man with ambition. That is good. We do not have patience for drifters who lack purpose." "And what happens when you get that land?" Caleb asked, his voice dropping lower. "Will you work it alone?" The question hung in the air, weighted with something Marcus could not quite name. He felt it though, the shift in atmosphere, the way both brothers seemed to lean forward without moving, their attention sharpening. "I have worked alone most of my life," Marcus said carefully. "I am accustomed to it." "That is a lonely way to live," Nathaniel murmured, his dark eyes glinting in the firelight. A man needs more than land to build something lasting. Marcus's throat tightened. He reached for his water, buying himself a moment, but he could feel their eyes on him, could sense the way they watched his every gesture. There was something deliberate in their attention, something that made him feel exposed in a way that had nothing to do with words. The meal continued, conversation flowing around topics of cattle and weather and the work that would begin at dawn. But beneath it all ran a current Marcus could not ignore, a tension that pulled tighter with every glance exchanged, every moment of silence that stretched just a breath too long. When Marcus finally excused himself to the bunkhouse, he felt their eyes follow him all the way to the door. The night air hit his face, cool and welcome, but it did nothing to settle the heat that had coiled in his chest. He told himself it was exhaustion, the strangeness of a new place. But deep down, in a part of himself he had learned long ago to quiet, Marcus knew the truth. Something had begun tonight. Something that had nothing to do with cattle or fences or the simple transaction of labor for coin. And the Thorne brothers, with their watchful eyes and weighted silences, knew it too. The first week passed in a blur of sweat and soreness. Marcus threw himself into the work with everything he had, rising before dawn to mend fences, haul feed, break green horses that fought him every step. The Double T demanded more than he had given any other ranch, and he gave it willingly, desperate to prove his worth, desperate to exhaust himself enough that he stopped thinking about the way Caleb's hand had lingered on his shoulder when showing him how to properly secure a saddle, or the way Nathaniel's voice dropped to something almost gentle when he corrected Marcus's grip on a branding iron. "They are testing me," Marcus told himself each night as he collapsed into his bunk, muscles screaming, seeing if I can handle their standards. But that explanation felt thinner with each passing day. On the 8th morning, Marcus was working in the barn, cleaning stalls in the dim early light, when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find both brothers standing in the doorway, their silhouettes backlit by the rising sun, making them look even larger, even more imposing. "We need to talk," Caleb said, and something in his tone made Marcus's stomach tighten. He set down the pitchfork, wiping his hands on his pants, and waited. Nathaniel closed the barn door behind them, cutting off the outside world, and Marcus was suddenly aware of how alone they were, how quiet everything had become. "You've been working hard," Nathaniel began, moving closer, "harder than most men we have hired. That is good, but there is something you are holding back." Marcus's heart kicked against his ribs. "I do not know what you mean. I have done everything you asked." Caleb stepped forward, closing the triangle, and Marcus found himself caught between them, his back nearly against the stall door. "You have done the work, yes, but you are always pulling away, always keeping distance, like you are afraid of something." "I am not afraid," Marcus said, but his voice came out rougher than intended, betraying him. Nathaniel's hand came up, not touching, but close enough that Marcus could feel the heat radiating from his palm as it hovered near Marcus's shoulder. "Then why do you flinch every time one of us gets close? Why do you eat your meals as fast as possible and disappear to the bunkhouse?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came, because how could he explain the way his skin felt too tight whenever they were near? The way his pulse hammered when Caleb's eyes lingered on him across the dinner table? The way he lay awake at night, staring at the bunkhouse ceiling, trying not to think about the main house and the two men sleeping there? "We are not blind," Caleb said softly, and there was something in his voice that made Marcus's breath catch. "We see the way you look at us when you think we are not paying attention. We see the way you go still when we come close, like a wild horse deciding whether to bolt or stand." Marcus's face burned. This was it. The moment he had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. They were going to tell him to leave, to take his dangerous attention somewhere else, to stop bringing his complications to their land. "I will pack my things," he said quietly, hating the way his voice shook. "I did not mean to make either of you uncomfortable." Both brothers went utterly still. Then Nathaniel laughed, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the barn. "Uncomfortable?" He exchanged a look with Caleb, something passing between them that Marcus could not read. "Is that what you think this is? Marcus looked up, confused, and found Caleb watching him with an expression that was almost gentle. Almost, except for the hunger burning behind it. "We brought you in here to tell you to stop running from us," Caleb said. "We have been patient, giving you time to settle, to see if what we suspected was real. But patience has its limits." The world seemed to tilt. Marcus gripped the stall door behind him, needing something solid. "What are you saying?" Nathaniel moved closer still, and this time Marcus did not pull away. "We are saying that the three of us have been circling each other like wolves for over a week now. We are saying that whatever you feel when we are near, we feel it too, and we are done pretending otherwise." Marcus's breath came shallow. This was not possible. Men like the Thorn brothers, powerful and respected across the territory, did not want men like him, did not feel things like this. "I do not understand," he whispered. Caleb reached out slowly, giving Marcus every chance to move away, and cupped his jaw with one large calloused hand. The touch sent lightning through Marcus's veins. "Then let us make it clear," Caleb said, his thumb brushing across Marcus's cheekbone. "We want you here, not just as a ranch hand. We want you with us, between us, ours." The word ours echoed through Marcus like a bell. He stared up at Caleb, then turned slightly to find Nathaniel watching with the same intensity, the same barely leashed desire. "This is insane," Marcus breathed, but he did not pull away from Caleb's touch. "What you are suggesting, people would not understand." Nathaniel's hand settled on Marcus's hip, warm and possessive through the fabric of his shirt. "This land is ours. What happens on it is ours to decide. No one else's concern." Marcus felt himself trembling, caught between them, their heat surrounding him like a forge. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that wanting this, wanting them, would only lead to pain. But another part of him, the part that had been hollow and aching for years, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was what home felt like. "I have never," Marcus started, then stopped, not sure how to finish. "Neither have we," Caleb admitted, and there was vulnerability in those words that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Not like this. Not with someone who fits between us like you do." Nathaniel's fingers tightened on Marcus's hip. "Say yes," he murmured. "Say you feel this too." And Marcus, who had spent his whole life running from anything that might tie him down, found himself leaning into Caleb's touch, found himself turning slightly toward Nathaniel's warmth, found himself whispering the word that would change everything. Yes. The barn went silent except for their breathing, three rhythms slowly sinking into one. Then Caleb leaned down, his forehead touching Marcus's, and everything else fell away. The work continued, but everything had shifted. Marcus still rose before dawn, still hauled and mended and broke horses. But now Caleb worked beside him, their shoulders brushing more often than necessary. Caleb's low voice offering guidance that felt like something more. Now Nathaniel found excuses to ride out and check Marcus's progress on distant fence lines, bringing water and staying longer than needed. His presence a steady weight that Marcus found himself craving. They moved around each other like dancers learning a new pattern, tentative but deliberate. A hand on the small of Marcus's back as Caleb guided him through a gate. Nathaniel's fingers lingering when passing Marcus a tool. The way they both watched him over dinner now, no longer hiding their attention, letting him feel the full force of their desire. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Marcus had never allowed himself to want anything this much. He had learned young that wanting led to disappointment, that hoping meant having further to fall. But the Thorn brothers made it impossible not to hope. They made him believe that maybe, just maybe, he could have this. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch after a long day, Nathaniel reached over and took Marcus's hand. It was a simple gesture, but it sent Marcus's heart racing. No one had ever held his hand before, not like this, not with such certainty. Caleb watched from his chair, a small smile playing at his lips. "You are thinking too hard again," he observed. Marcus huffed a laugh. "Someone has to. You two act like nothing about this is complicated." "Because it is not," Nathaniel said firmly, his thumb tracing circles on Marcus's palm. We want you. You want us. Everything else is just noise. But what about when people notice? Marcus asked, voicing the fear that kept him awake at night. When the other ranchers see, when the town talks. Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Let them talk. This land has been ours for 10 years. We have built something here that no one can take away. And if they try, he exchanged a look with Nathaniel, we will remind them why it is unwise to challenge the Thorn brothers. There was steel in those words, a promise of protection that made Marcus's throat tight. He had spent so long protecting himself, keeping walls high and armor thick. The thought of letting these men stand between him and the world felt impossible and essential all at once. Stay with us, Nathaniel said quietly. Not just for 3 months, not just until you have enough coin. Stay and build this with us. Make it yours too. Marcus looked at their faces in the dying light, saw the hope and certainty written there, and felt something crack open in his chest. Something that had been locked away for so long he had forgotten it existed. What if I am not strong enough? He whispered. What if I break? Then we will hold you together, Caleb said simply. That is what this is. That is what we are offering. And Marcus, who had been running his whole life, finally stopped. The kiss happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after Marcus had whispered yes in the barn. They were working together to repair the roof of the equipment shed, the three of them moving in practiced coordination, when Marcus lost his footing on the slick boards. He would have fallen hard if Caleb had not grabbed him, pulling him against his chest with arms that wrapped around Marcus like iron bands. For a moment they stood frozen, Marcus's heart hammering against Caleb's, both breathing hard. Then Caleb's hand came up to cup the back of Marcus's head, and he leaned down slowly, giving Marcus every chance to pull away. Marcus did not pull away. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then Marcus made a low sound in his throat, his hands fisting in Caleb's shirt, and the kiss deepened. It was nothing like Marcus had imagined in the dark privacy of his bunk. It was better, sweeter, and more overwhelming. When they finally broke apart, both breathing ragged, Nathaniel was standing at the edge of the roof, watching them with eyes that burned. My turn, he said, his voice rough with want. And Marcus, dizzy and aching, turned into Nathaniel's arms and learned that the twins' kiss was different, fiercer, more demanding. He learned that wanting could be soft and hard all at once. That desire could make him feel strong and vulnerable in the same breath. That night, they did not send Marcus back to the bunkhouse. Instead, Caleb took his hand and led him to the main house, to a bedroom that smelled of pine and leather. They showed him without words what it meant to be wanted by two men who had decided he was theirs. They learned each other slowly, mapping skin and scars, finding what made each other gasp and tremble. Caleb's touch was steady and sure, guiding Marcus through sensations that threatened to overwhelm him. Nathaniel's hands were more demanding, claiming and possessive, making Marcus understand that he belonged to both of them now. The moonlight spilled through the window, painting their tangled bodies in silver. Marcus lay between them, feeling the warmth of Caleb at his back, the solid presence of Nathaniel before him. Their hands found his in the darkness, fingers intertwining, three becoming one. This is what home feels like, Marcus thought as sleep finally claimed him. Not a place, but the people who refused to let you go. The weeks that followed were some of the best of Marcus's life. The work remained hard, the days long and demanding, but now he had something to return to each night. Two men who looked at him like he was precious, who touched him like he mattered, who made him believe that he was more than just a drifter passing through. They fell into a rhythm, the three of them, learning how to move through their days and nights as a unit. Caleb, steady and thoughtful, always planning 3 steps ahead. Nathaniel, quick and intense, following instinct more than logic. And Marcus, finding his place between them, balancing their differences, becoming the bridge that connected them. But happiness, Marcus had learned, was never simple, and nothing good ever lasted without a fight. The trouble started on a Saturday when they rode into town for supplies. Marcus should have seen it coming, should have recognized the way people's eyes lingered, the whispers that followed them down the street, but he had been too caught up in the simple joy of walking beside Caleb and Nathaniel, of not having to hide. They were loading supplies into the wagon when a voice cut across the street, loud and sharp. Well now, if it is not the Thorne brothers and their new pet. Marcus stiffened, his hands freezing on the crate he was lifting. He turned slowly to see a group of men gathered outside the saloon, and at their center stood Warren Blake, owner of the neighboring ranch and a man known for his cruelty to anyone he considered weak. The Thorne brothers went very still, that particular kind of stillness that preceded violence. Nathaniel's hand drifted toward the gun at his hip, but Caleb caught his wrist, holding him back. "Blake," Caleb said evenly, "we do not want trouble." Blake laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Is that so? Because from where I am standing, you boys have already caused plenty of trouble, parading around with your little friend here, like it is something to be proud of." Shame spread through Marcus like poison. He had known this moment would come, had tried to prepare for it, but nothing could have readied him for the public humiliation, for the way every eye on the street turned to stare. "Walk away, Blake," Nathaniel growled, "while you still can." But Blake was not done. He stepped closer, his men following like a pack of wolves. "I am just trying to understand," he continued, his voice dripping with false innocence. "What exactly is it that Boy offers that is worth ruining your reputation over?" The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He felt his face burn, felt the eyes of the entire town crawling over his skin. This was what he had feared, what he had known would happen if they were not careful. And now, it was here, and he had no armor against it. Before Marcus could respond, before he could apologize or run or do anything, Caleb moved. One moment he was standing by the wagon, the next he had Blake by the throat, slamming him back against the saloon wall with such force the boards cracked. "You will apologize," Caleb said, his voice deadly quiet, "and then you will leave." Blake struggled, his face reddening, but Caleb did not loosen his grip. Beside him, Nathaniel stood ready, his hand now firmly on his gun, daring anyone to interfere. The street had gone silent, every person frozen, watching. "I will not," Blake choked out. Then Caleb's hand tightened. "Then I will make you." What happened next happened fast. Blake's men surged forward. Nathaniel drew his gun, not to shoot but to warn. Someone shouted, and then the sheriff was there, pushing through the crowd, his weathered face grim. "Enough," Sheriff Hawkins barked. "Caleb, let him go." Caleb hesitated, his eyes locked on Blake's terrified face, and for a moment Marcus thought he might refuse. But then Nathaniel touched his shoulder, a gentle reminder, and Caleb released him. Blake collapsed against the wall, gasping. The sheriff looked between them, his expression unreadable. "I think you boys should head home," he said quietly. "And Blake, you would do well to mind your own business." It was not quite justice, but it was close enough. The crowd dispersed, still whispering, and Marcus found himself being guided back to the wagon by both brothers, their hands firm on his arms. He felt numb, disconnected from his body, shame and fear warring in his chest. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Marcus stared at his hands, unable to meet either brother's eyes. This was his fault. He had let himself hope, had let himself believe that wanting them could be without consequence. And now he had made them targets. The sun was setting by the time they reached the ranch, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Marcus climbed down from the wagon, his movements mechanical, his mind replaying Blake's words over and over like a wound that would not stop bleeding. He felt the brothers watching him, felt the weight of their concern, but he could not bring himself to look at them, could not bear to see regret beginning to take root in their eyes. He walked toward the bunkhouse, old habits rising like ghosts. That was where he belonged, after all. Not in their house, not in their bed. He had been foolish to think otherwise, foolish to believe that 3 months could turn into forever. But Caleb's voice stopped him. "Where do you think you are going?" Marcus turned slowly. Both brothers stood by the wagon, their faces shadowed in the dying light, but their eyes burned with something Marcus could not quite name. "The bunkhouse," he said quietly. "Where I should have stayed all along." Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "You don't sleep in the bunkhouse anymore. You sleep with us. You know that." "Not after today," Marcus said, and heard his voice crack despite his best efforts. "Not after what happened. You should distance yourselves from me before this gets worse." The brothers exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations Marcus had, learned to recognize but never quite understand. Then they moved as one, crossing the space between them and Marcus in long, deliberate strides. "We are not doing this again," Caleb said, his voice low and intense. "We are not letting you run every time you get scared." "I am not running," Marcus protested, even as he took a step back. "I am being practical. I am protecting you." Nathaniel caught his wrist, not rough but firm, holding him in place. "We do not need your protection. We need you to trust us." Marcus felt something break inside him, all the fear and shame he had been holding back rushing up like a flood. "You do not understand," he said, his voice rising. "Blake was just the beginning. There will be others. They will make your lives hell. They will turn the whole territory against you. Everything you have built, everything you have worked for, it will all come crashing down because of me. And you think we do not know that?" Caleb stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You think we did not consider the consequences before we decided we wanted you?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, because the truth was he had not thought about it that way, had not considered that they might have chosen him knowing full well what it would cost. "We are not children," Nathaniel said softly. "We did not stumble into this blind. We knew exactly what we were doing when we asked you to stay, when we showed you how we felt, when we made you ours." "But why?" Marcus whispered, the question torn from somewhere deep inside. "Why would you risk everything for someone like me?" Caleb cupped Marcus's face with both hands, forcing him to meet his eyes. "Because you are worth it. Because what we have is worth it. Because a life lived hiding who we are is not a life at all. And because," Nathaniel added, moving to stand behind Marcus, his chest pressed against Marcus's back, "we love you." The words hit Marcus like lightning. They had never said it before, not in those exact words. They had shown it in 100 different ways, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way nothing else had. "I love you too," Marcus breathed, tears finally spilling over. "Both of you, so much it terrifies me." "Then be terrified with us," Caleb said, leaning his forehead against Marcus's. "But do not run, do not leave. Let us be scared together." Marcus felt Nathaniel's arms wrap around him from behind, felt Caleb's hands gentle on his face, and something inside him finally surrendered. He had spent his whole life building walls, convinced that keeping people out was the only way to stay safe. But the Thorne brothers had shown him a different kind of safety, the kind that came from letting people in, from trusting them to hold you when you could not stand on your own. They stood there as the last light faded from the sky, 3 men holding each other against the darkness, choosing each other despite everything the world might throw at them. And Marcus finally understood what they had been trying to tell him all along. Love was not about avoiding pain or consequences. It was about deciding that some things, some people, were worth facing anything for. That night, they did not talk about Blake or the town or what might come next. Instead, they simply existed together, learning each other all over again, reaffirming with touch and breath and whispered words that they belonged to each other, that nothing would change that they were home. When Marcus finally fell asleep between them, his hand clasped tightly in Caleb's, Nathaniel's arm secure around his waist, he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind that shattered at the first sign of trouble, but the stubborn, resilient kind that refused to die no matter how hard the world pushed back. The kind of hope that built ranches in the wilderness and made families out of strangers and turned 3 men into something unbreakable. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the storm of the previous day had never happened. Marcus woke slowly, aware of warmth on both sides, of the steady breathing of the men who had claimed him as theirs. For a moment he simply lay there, letting himself feel it, the safety, the belonging, the quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Caleb stirred first, his hand finding Marcus's face in the early light. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Marcus turned into the touch, pressing a kiss to Caleb's palm. "Morning." Nathaniel made a low sound of contentment, his arm tightening around Marcus's waist. "Too early for talking," he grumbled, but there was affection in his voice. They lay like that for a while longer, three bodies intertwined, no one willing to break the spell of peace that had settled over them. But eventually, the ranch demanded their attention. Cattle needed feeding. Fences needed checking. Life needed living. As they dressed, moving around each other with the practiced ease of people who knew each other's rhythms, Marcus caught sight of himself in the small mirror above the wash basin. He looked different somehow. The shadows under his eyes had softened, the tight line of his mouth had eased. He looked like a man who had finally stopped running. "You all right?" Nathaniel asked, coming up behind him, his reflection appearing in the mirror beside Marcus's. Marcus met his eyes in the glass. "Yeah," he said, and meant it. "I think I finally am." Nathaniel's hand settled on his shoulders, steady and sure. "Good, because we have a lot of work ahead of us. Building this life, making it stick, showing everyone who doubts us that we're not going anywhere." Marcus turned in his arms, reaching up to touch Nathaniel's scarred eyebrow, that mark that made him distinct from his twin. "I am ready for it. All of it." Nathaniel smiled, one of those rare, genuine smiles that transformed his usually stern face. "Then let us get started." They worked side by side that day, the three of them, and Marcus felt the difference in every gesture, every glance, every moment of casual contact. They had always worked well together, but now there was an openness to it, a freedom. They did not hide their affection, did not pull away when their hands touched. On their own land, they could be exactly who they were. And that, Marcus realized, as the sun climbed high and hot above them, was its own kind of revolution. Every fence post they drove together, every horse they trained, every meal they shared, it was all an act of defiance. They were building a life that the world said should not exist, and they were doing it with their heads held high and their hearts wide open. By the time evening fell and they gathered on the porch, exhausted and satisfied, Marcus looked out over the double T and saw it differently. This was not just a ranch, it was a declaration, a promise, a testament to the stubborn, magnificent refusal to let fear win. Thank you for being here with me tonight. If this story has stirred something in your heart, memories of longing and belonging, go ahead and subscribe to my channel so that each day we can sit together once more, and I will tell you another story from the West, where hearts find courage in the dust and the wind. "I should leave," Marcus said as they pulled up to the house. His voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. "This will only get worse if I stay." Both brothers froze. Then Nathaniel turned to him, his face thunderous. "What did you just say?" "You heard, Blake," Marcus continued, forcing the words out. "The whole town heard him. Your reputation, your business. I am putting everything you have built at risk." Caleb came around the wagon, his expression intense. "So your solution is to run?" "Exactly," Marcus snapped, anger suddenly flaring hot in his chest. "What else do you expect me to do? I cannot fight an entire territory. I cannot make people accept this. And I will not watch you lose everything because of me." Nathaniel grabbed Marcus's face with both hands, forcing him to meet his eyes. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "We chose you, we chose this, and we will fight whoever we have to fight to keep it." But Marcus was already pulling away, his walls slamming back into place, armor locking down tight. He had been foolish to believe this could work. Men like him did not get to keep beautiful things. "That is easy for you to say now," Marcus said coldly. "But when the other ranchers turn on you, when they stop doing business with you, when your entire livelihood is threatened, You will regret this. You will regret me." Caleb stepped forward, and there was hurt in his eyes that made Marcus's chest ache. "Is that really what you think? That we are so weak, so easily swayed, that we would throw you away the moment things got difficult?" "Yes," Marcus shouted, the word torn from somewhere deep inside, "because that is what people do. They leave. They give up. They decide you are not worth the trouble." The silence that followed felt like the end of the world. Then Nathaniel's voice came, quiet but fierce. "We are not people, Marcus. We are us, and we do not give up on what is ours." Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, fighting against the tears that threatened. "I cannot be what you need me to be," he whispered. "I cannot be strong enough for this." "Then you do not have to be," Caleb said, and suddenly he was there, pulling Marcus into his arms. "That is the point. You do not have to be strong all the time. You have us for that." And Nathaniel was there too, surrounding Marcus from behind, their combined warmth breaking through his defenses like sunlight through clouds. "We will face this together," Nathaniel murmured, "whatever comes. But you have to stop running. You have to trust us." Marcus broke then, the tears coming hot and fast, years of loneliness and fear pouring out. The brothers held him through it, steady and certain, proving with their presence what their words promised. When Marcus finally calmed, exhausted and raw, he found himself being carried into the house, being laid on the bed he had come to think of as theirs. The Thorne brothers stretched out on either side of him, their hands finding his in the darkness. "We mean it," Caleb said softly. "All of it. Whatever fight comes, we face it as three." Marcus turned his face into Caleb's shoulder, then reached back to grip Nathaniel's hand tighter. He was not sure he believed them yet, not completely, but for the first time in his life, he wanted to try. The days after the confrontation in town were tense. Marcus waited for consequences, for angry ranchers to show up demanding the Thorne brothers see sense, for business to dry up, for violence to come knocking, but none of it happened. Instead, the Double T carried on as it always had. Cattle were moved, fences mended, horses trained, and slowly Marcus began to understand something fundamental about the men he had given his heart to. The Thorne brothers did not bend, they never had. It was what had allowed them to carve a ranch out of wilderness, to build something lasting in a land that destroyed the weak. And that same steel that had shaped the Double T now protected Marcus with the same unwavering certainty. When Jacob Miller, owner of the feed store, tried to refuse them service, Nathaniel had simply looked at him and asked if he wanted to explain to his wife why their business was failing. Miller sold them the grain. When the banker expressed concerns about the ranch's reputation, Caleb had calmly listed every loan and favor the Double T had provided over the years, and asked if the bank would prefer to lose their most reliable customer. The banker apologized, and when a group of younger ranchers showed up one evening, drunk and looking for trouble, both brothers had walked out onto the porch with rifles in hand and a promise in their eyes that sent the troublemakers running. Through it all, Marcus watched and learned that strength was not just about physical power, but about knowing your worth and refusing to compromise it. Learned that love could be fierce as well as gentle, could be a shield as much as a shelter. 1 month after the incident in town, Marcus was working in the north pasture when he saw a figure approaching on horseback. He tensed, then relaxed when he recognized Sheriff Hawkins. The older man dismounted slowly, his weathered face thoughtful as he approached. "Marcus," he said with a nod. "Sheriff," Marcus replied carefully. "I am not here for trouble," Hawkins continued. "Just wanted a word." Marcus waited, his heart pounding. He liked the sheriff, had always found him fair, but he did not know where the man stood on matters like this. The sheriff was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "My deputy," he began. "James. You have probably seen him around town." Marcus nodded. He had seen James, a quiet young man who always seemed nervous around the other deputies. Hawkins continued, his voice soft. "He is my nephew, and he is like you." "Like me," Marcus repeated, not quite believing what he was hearing. The sheriff met his eyes. "I have known for years, and I have watched him hide it, watched him make himself smaller and quieter, terrified someone will figure it out. It breaks my heart. But then he saw you three in town, saw the way the Thorne brothers stood with you, unashamed. And for the first time, he came to me and talked about it. Tears pricked at Marcus's eyes. He did not know what to say. I am not saying everyone will understand, Hawkins went on, or that this will be easy. But what you three have, the way you refuse to hide it, that matters. It tells men like James that maybe they do not have to hide either. Marcus's voice came rough. Thank you for telling me that. The sheriff mounted his horse, then paused. Those brothers of yours, they are good men. Hard, but good. You're lucky to have them. I know, Marcus said, and meant it with everything in him. After Hawkins rode away, Marcus stood in the pasture, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, and felt something shift inside him. He had spent so long believing that wanting this made him weak, made him wrong, but maybe the real strength was in refusing to let shame win. That night, when Caleb and Nathaniel found him on the porch, Marcus told them about the sheriff's visit, told them about James, and when he finished, both brothers were quiet for a long moment. Then Nathaniel said, "See, we told you it mattered." And Caleb added, "You matter." The words settled into Marcus's chest like seeds taking root. He pulled both men close, breathing them in, letting himself believe what they had been trying to show him all along. This was real. This was worth fighting for. This was home. The seasons changed, and Marcus stopped counting the days. He stopped thinking about the 3 months he had originally planned to stay, stopped calculating how much coin he would need to buy land elsewhere, because somewhere along the way, the Double T had stopped being a temporary stop and started being his future. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts. Marcus brought new ideas about water management, and the brothers implemented them without question. Nathaniel taught Marcus how to read the weather, how to know when storms were coming days before they hit. Caleb showed him the books, taught him the business side of ranching, and slowly began adding Marcus's name to documents, making it official in the only way that mattered. They built a new barn together, the three of them working side by side in the summer heat. And when it was finished, Caleb carved their initials into the main beam, CTNTMW, proof that Marcus belonged here just as much as they did. The town slowly adjusted. Not everyone accepted them, but enough people chose tolerance over hatred that life became easier. Some ranchers still muttered, but when the Double T consistently had the healthiest cattle and the best horses, even the muttering lost its edge. Marcus found unexpected allies too. The widow Henderson, who ran the general store, always had a kind word and extra supplies set aside for them. The blacksmith, a man named Thomas, who had lost his own partner to a mining accident, treated them with quiet respect. And James, the sheriff's nephew, started visiting the ranch on his days off, seeking advice and friendship from men who understood. One autumn evening, as the three of them sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Nathaniel suddenly said, "I want to show you something." He disappeared into the house and returned carrying a wooden box Marcus had never seen before. Setting it on the porch rail, he opened it carefully. Inside were 3 silver rings, simple but beautiful, each engraved with a pattern that looked like wheat intertwined with thorns. "I had these made in Denver," Nathaniel said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "Took me 3 trips to get them right." Marcus stared at the rings, his heart in his throat. "We cannot legally marry," Caleb said softly, "but we can make our own promises. We can claim each other in the ways that matter." He picked up one of the rings, turning it so Marcus could see the inside. Forever was engraved there in small, precise letters. Nathaniel picked up another ring. The smith asked what I wanted them to say, and I could only think of one word that mattered. He showed Marcus the inscription, "Ours," and Marcus, his hands shaking, picked up the 3rd ring and saw his own heart spelled out in silver. Home. Yes, he breathed, and the word felt like every promise he had ever been afraid to make. Yes to this. Yes to us. Yes to forever. They put the rings on each other as the sun set. 3 men making vows that no church would recognize, but that meant everything nonetheless. And when they kissed, sealing their promises, Marcus tasted salt and knew it was not just his tears. That night, they lay tangled together in bed, rings catching the moonlight, and Caleb said quietly, "We should expand the house, add another room." Marcus propped himself up on an elbow. "Why?" Caleb exchanged a look with Nathaniel, something passing between them. "Because someday," Nathaniel said slowly, "we might want to share this with someone else, someone smaller." Marcus's breath caught. "You mean?" "There are options," Caleb continued. "Children who need homes. We could provide that, if you wanted to. Could make this family bigger." The thought overwhelmed Marcus. He had never let himself imagine a future like that, never believed he deserved it. But lying between these men who had taught him that love could be solid and certain and unashamed, he found himself nodding. "I would like that," he whispered. "Someday, someday," both brothers agreed, and pulled him close. The winter that followed was harsh, testing the ranch and everyone on it. Blizzards buried the fences, wolves prowled close to the livestock, and there were days when leaving the house felt like walking into knives. But through it all, the three of them held together, taking shifts to watch the herds, keeping the fires burning, surviving by refusing to give up. And when spring finally broke, when the snow melted and the first green shoots appeared, they stood together surveying land that had survived its hardest test. Marcus had arrived at the Double T believing he would stay 3 months. He had been alone, rootless, convinced that wanting anything more than survival was foolishness. But the Thorne brothers had shown him a different truth. They had taught him that some things were worth fighting for, worth risking everything to protect. They had given him purpose and partnership and a place where he did not have to hide. They had given him home. And standing between them now, watching the sun rise over land that bore all their names, Marcus finally understood what the rings meant. This was not just about love, though there was love in abundance. This was about choosing each other every day, through hardship and judgment and fear, about building something that could weather any storm, because it was founded on trust and respect and unwavering commitment. 2 years had passed since Marcus first rode up to the Double T Ranch. 2 years of building and growing and learning what it meant to be part of something bigger than himself. The ranch had expanded, their reputation solidified, not despite their unconventional arrangement, but somehow because of it. People respected strength, and there was strength in refusing to hide. On a bright morning in May, Marcus stood in the yard, watching a wagon approach. Beside him, Caleb and Nathaniel waited, all 3 men nervous, in a way that work and weather had never made them. The wagon pulled up, and a woman climbed down. Mrs. Patterson from the Territorial Orphanage, her kind face lined with years of hard decisions. Behind her in the wagon sat a small figure, a boy no more than 7, with dark hair and eyes that held too much knowledge for his age. "This is Daniel," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "His parents passed last winter. Fever took them both. He has been with us 6 months now, but he needs a home, a real home." Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. Daniel looked at him warily, then at the 2 towering figures of Caleb and Nathaniel behind him. "You all live here?" Daniel asked, his voice small. "We do," Marcus said, "all 3 of us, together." The boy processed this, his young mind working through what that meant. "My pa used to say men like that were wrong." Then more quietly, "But my pa also used to hit my ma when he was drunk, so maybe he did not know everything." Marcus felt his heart crack open. He glanced back at Caleb and Nathaniel, saw the same emotion reflected in their eyes. "We are not wrong," Nathaniel said, stepping forward and crouching beside Marcus. "We are just different, and different is not bad. It is just different." Daniel studied them all carefully, then with the brutal honesty of childhood asked, "Would you hit me?" "Never," Caleb said, his voice firm as bedrock. "We do not hurt the people we care about. That is a promise." The boy was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at Marcus. "You seem nice. Less scary than them." He pointed at the twins. Marcus smiled. They're not as scary as they look. They just have big faces to match their big hearts. Daniel almost smiled at that. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. I will leave you all to talk. Daniel, these men want to give you a home, but only if you want it too. No one will force you. She walked back to the wagon to give them privacy. Marcus sat down in the dirt, not caring about his clean clothes. After a moment, Daniel sat beside him. Caleb and Nathaniel settled nearby, careful not to overwhelm the child with their size. Tell me about yourself, Marcus said. What do you like? Daniel shrugged. I like horses and reading, though I'm not very good at it yet. And I like when people tell the truth instead of pretending. We have horses, Nathaniel offered. More than we know what to do with. You could help care for them. And I read every night, Caleb added. Could teach you if you wanted. The boy looked between them. Why do you want me? There are lots of kids at the orphanage. Marcus took a breath, choosing his words carefully. Because we have built something good here, something strong, and we want to share it with someone who needs it. We want to give you what we have, a home where you can be yourself without fear. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I am not brave like you. I get scared a lot. That's all right, Marcus said gently. Being brave does not mean not being scared. It means doing things even when you are scared. And besides, he gestured to the brothers, you will have two very large, very protective men, making sure nothing bad ever happens to you again. And me, he added, you will have me too. The boy wiped his eyes. Can I think about it? Of course, Caleb said. Take all the time you need. But Daniel was already looking at the ranch, at the sturdy buildings and the horses in the pasture, and the three men who watched him with such gentle hope. Actually, he said slowly, I think I would like to stay, if that is all right. Mrs. Patterson reappeared, somehow knowing the exact right moment. She had papers in her hand, documents that would need signing. As she and Caleb discussed the legalities, Nathaniel showed Daniel the barn, pointing out which horses were gentlest for beginners. Marcus stood in the yard, watching his family grow before his eyes, and felt a completeness he had never imagined possible. That night, Daniel slept in the new room they had built, the one Caleb had suggested adding 2 years ago. The boy had been nervous about sleeping alone, so Marcus sat with him, telling stories of the West until Daniel's eyes grew heavy. Before he fell asleep, Daniel reached out and took Marcus's hand. Thank you, the boy whispered, for choosing me. We will always choose you, Marcus promised. That is what family does. Later, Marcus joined Caleb and Nathaniel on the porch. The three of them sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. You were right, Marcus said finally. About all of it. About this being worth fighting for. About not running. About home. Caleb wrapped an arm around his shoulders. We were right together. That is the difference. Nathaniel took Marcus's other hand, the one with the silver ring catching starlight. This is just the beginning, he said. There is so much more ahead. Marcus leaned into them both, surrounded by the warmth of the men he loved, under a sky vast enough to hold all their dreams. He thought about the lonely drifter who had ridden up to this ranch years ago, convinced he would never be anything more than a hired hand passing through. That man had been so afraid of wanting anything, so certain that hoping would only lead to pain. But hope had led him here, to Caleb's steady strength and Nathaniel's fierce protection, to a ranch that bore his name alongside theirs, to a child sleeping safely in the next room, already beginning to heal in the shelter of their love. The Double T Ranch stood strong in the valley, its reputation built on hard work and integrity. And the three men who owned it stood just as strong, proving that family was not about blood, but about who you chose to stand beside when the world pushed back. Marcus Webb had come to the ranch looking for 3 months of work. What he found instead was a lifetime of purpose. 2 men who loved him without shame, the courage to finally believe he deserved it all, And now, a child who needed them as much as they needed him. The prairie wind carried his name now, woven into the story of the Double T, and he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Always together. Forever theirs. Finally home. And that home kept growing. Sometimes we spend our whole lives running from the very thing we need most. We build walls and tell ourselves they are protection, when really they are prisons. Marcus had learned that home was not a place you found. It was something you built, board by board, moment by moment, with people who refused to let you face the storms alone. Out here in the West, where the land was harsh and unforgiving, love had to be just as strong. It had to be able to withstand judgment and weather and fear. It had to be built on bedrock, on choosing each other not just once, but every single day. The Thorne brothers had taught Marcus that, and now, together, they would teach Daniel. They would show him that different did not mean wrong. That family came in all shapes. That love was not about who society said you should care for, but about who you chose to stand beside when everything tried to tear you apart. Years from now, when Daniel was grown and the three men were older, they would sit on this same porch and tell stories. Stories of courage and acceptance. Stories of building something beautiful in a place that tried to break them. Stories of love that refused to hide. And maybe, if they were very lucky, Daniel would bring his own family back to the Double T, would show his children the initials carved in the barn beam, and tell them about the three men who taught him that home was not about fitting in, but about finding the people who made you feel like you belonged exactly as you were. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and eternal, and beneath them, on a ranch carved from wilderness and stubbornness, three men held each other close and dreamed of all the tomorrows yet to come. The first few weeks with Daniel were both harder and easier than Marcus had expected. The boy was resilient, had survived losses that would have broken many adults, but that survival had left scars. He woke screaming from nightmares most nights, and it took Marcus or one of the brothers hours to calm him back to sleep. He flinched at sudden movements, expected punishment for the smallest mistakes, and watched them all with wary eyes, waiting for the moment they would prove themselves false. But slowly, day by day, Daniel began to trust. He learned that when Caleb said he would teach him to read, he meant it, and every evening they sat together with books spread across the kitchen table. He learned that Nathaniel's gruff exterior hid a gentle patience, especially when showing Daniel how to brush and care for the horses. And he learned that Marcus understood in a way the brothers could not quite grasp what it felt like to be unwanted, to believe yourself unworthy of love. One afternoon, Marcus found Daniel sitting alone in the barn, tears streaming down his face. He had accidentally let one of the chickens escape, and it had taken an hour to catch it again. "I am sorry," Daniel sobbed. "I know you are going to send me back now. I tried to be good, but I messed up." Marcus sat down beside him in the hay, his heart breaking. "Daniel," he said gently, "do you know how many times I have messed up since I came here?" The boy shook his head. "Too many to count," Marcus admitted. "I have let horses loose, burned dinner, broken fences, said the wrong thing at the wrong time. And you know what Caleb and Nathaniel did?" Daniel looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "What?" "They helped me fix it. They showed me how to do better next time. They never once made me feel like I was not good enough. That is what family does." "But what if I am too much trouble?" Daniel whispered. "What if you decide I am not worth it?" Marcus pulled the boy into his arms, holding him tight. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are worth it. You are worth every sleepless night, every mistake, every moment of difficulty. You are ours now, Daniel, and we do not give up on what is ours." The boy clung to him, and Marcus felt hot tears soaking through his shirt. He thought about all the times he had asked himself the same question, had wondered if he was too much trouble for the Thorne brothers. And he thought about how patiently they had proven him wrong, over and over, until he finally believed it. Now it was his turn to do the same for Daniel. That evening, as they all sat down to dinner, Daniel cleared his throat. The three men looked at him, waiting. "Can I ask you something?" the boy said quietly. "Of course," Nathaniel replied. "Anything." Daniel fidgeted with his fork. "At the orphanage, some of the other kids used to say mean things about people like you, about men who love men. They said it was wrong." The air in the room went still. Marcus felt his chest tighten, old fears rising. But Caleb's response was calm and measured. "What do you think, Daniel?" The boy considered this. "I think," he said slowly, "that you are the kindest people I have ever met. And I think that if love makes people kinder and safer and better, then it cannot be wrong." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Out of the mouths of children came truths that adults spent lifetimes trying to understand. "You are exactly right," Nathaniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "Love is never wrong, not when it is real and true and makes everyone involved better people." Daniel nodded, seeming satisfied. Then he looked at Marcus. "Is it okay if I call you Pa? Not father or dad, but Pa?" Marcus could not speak around the lump in his throat. He nodded, and Daniel smiled. A real smile. The first truly unguarded expression Marcus had seen on the boy's face. "And them?" Daniel pointed at the brothers. "What should I call them?" "That's up to you," Caleb said gently. "Whatever feels right." Daniel thought about this. "Can I call you both Uncle? Uncle Caleb and Uncle Nathaniel?" Both brothers nodded, their faces soft with affection. "We would be honored," Nathaniel said. And just like that, their family was complete. Not perfect, still healing, still learning, but whole in the ways that mattered. As the months passed, Daniel thrived. He grew stronger, helped more around the ranch, made friends when they occasionally went to town. And he learned from his three fathers what it meant to live with integrity, to stand tall in the face of judgment, to love without shame. The Double T became known not just as a successful ranch, but as a place of refuge. Other boys from the orphanage came to visit, and sometimes to stay, drawn by stories of the unusual family that had made a home there. Marcus and the brothers never turned anyone away. They built more rooms, expanded the operation, created a community of people who had been told they did not fit anywhere else. And slowly, the territory changed. Not everyone accepted them. Some never would. But enough people saw the good they did, the lives they changed, the love they showed. That tolerance began to replace hatred. The Double T proved that different did not mean wrong. That family could take many forms. That love was love, regardless of who felt it. On Daniel's 10th birthday, 3 years after he had arrived at the ranch, the four of them rode out to the highest point on their land. From there, they could see everything they had built together. The expanded house, the new barns, the thriving herds, the fields green with crops. "This is ours," Caleb said, his arm around Marcus. "All of it. We built this together." Daniel looked up at them, his young face serious. "Will it always be ours?" "Always," Marcus promised. "No matter what comes, we face it together, and we never let go." The boy smiled and leaned against him, and Marcus felt the weight of that trust, the responsibility and the gift of it. He thought about the lonely drifter he had been, riding up to this ranch with nothing but 3 months' worth of hope. He had been so afraid then, afraid of wanting, afraid of staying, afraid of believing he could have anything more than survival. But fear had not kept him safe. It had kept him empty. Courage, the courage to say yes, to stay, to trust, that was what had saved him. The brothers had given him that courage by loving him when he could not love himself. And now, together, they were giving it to Daniel and to every lost soul who found their way to the Double T. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The four of them sat together, watching their ranch glow in the dying light. And Marcus knew that this was what it meant to be home. Not a place, but the people who refused to let you go. Not safety from hardship, but the certainty that you would never face it alone. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of love strong enough to make fear irrelevant. As darkness fell and they made their way back down the hill, Daniel riding ahead on his pony, Marcus felt Caleb and Nathaniel's hands find his, one on each side. They walked like that, connected, Three men who had chosen each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that choice. When they reached the ranch, Daniel had already put his pony away and was waiting on the porch. The lamplight from inside spilled out, warm and welcoming, turning the windows into beacons in the gathering dark. This is what they had created. Not just buildings and fences and livestock, but light in the darkness. Hope for the hopeless. Home for the homeless. That night, after Daniel had gone to bed, the three of them stood in their bedroom, the space they had shared for years now. Caleb pulled out a worn leather journal Marcus had never seen before. "What is that?" Marcus asked. "Our story," Nathaniel said quietly. "Caleb has been writing it down. Every important moment, every milestone, so we never forget how we got here." Caleb opened it, and Marcus saw pages filled with neat handwriting. The date Marcus arrived, the day they first told him they wanted him, the confrontation with Blake, the rings, Daniel's arrival, a chronicle of their lives, preserved in ink and paper. "Someday," Caleb said softly, "when we are gone and Daniel is old, he will have this. He will know exactly who we were and what we stood for. He will know that love won." Marcus felt tears spill over. All this time he had thought he was the one being saved. But the truth was more complicated, more beautiful. They had saved each other. The Thorne brothers had given him a home, but he had given them something too. He had given them the courage to be themselves completely, to stop hiding the fullness of who they were, and together they had built something that would outlast them all. Years turned into decades. Daniel grew into a fine young man, strong and kind, carrying forward everything they had taught him. He brought home a partner of his own eventually, a quiet young man from town who had faced his own struggles with acceptance. And the cycle continued. Love begetting love, courage inspiring courage. The Double T Ranch became legendary in the territory, not just for its success, but for what it represented. Three men and a boy who had refused to let the world tell them who they could be, who had built a family on their own terms and defended it with everything they had. When Marcus was old and gray, sitting on that same porch with Caleb and Nathaniel, their bodies worn but their spirits unbroken, he would sometimes think back to that first day. The nervous young man who had ridden up to the gate with nothing but hope and fear warring in his heart, and he would marvel at how far they had come, how much they had built, how many lives they had touched simply by refusing to hide. The Double T stood strong through generations, a testament to the truth that love, real love, could weather any storm. And somewhere in the barn, carved deep into the main beam, three sets of initials remained. CT, NT, MW, forever, ours, home. Thank you for sitting with me through this story, for letting me share these moments of courage and connection with you. If these words have touched your heart, if they have reminded you that love comes in many forms and all of them are beautiful, then subscribe to my channel. Each day we will gather here again, and I will tell you more stories from the West, where the land is hard but the hearts are true, and where home is always worth fighting for.